Welcome back. I'm Stephanie Rule. Now to a huge story coming out of North Carolina's 9th Congressional District. Never heard of it? Well, let's fill you in. The Democrat who had conceded the race exactly 1 month ago today has now taken it back as state officials investigate allegations of absentee ballot fraud. Here's Dan McCready on Rachel Maddow just last night.
You know, your vote is your voice. It is our most sacred right as Americans, is our right to vote. But I started my career in the Marine Corps, where I served overseas, and could never have imagined that I would come back home to North Carolina only to see our very democracy, our very right to vote under attack here in North Carolina by criminals and politicians.
So let's give this more attention and explain what's going on here. As things stand right now, the unofficial results of the race for the 9th District of South of Charlotte are incredibly close. The Republican Mark Harris and the Democrat Dan McCready are separated by just 905 votes. But the state elections board refused to certify the results last week because of allegations of, quote, irregularities and concerted fraudulent activities involving mail-in ballots in the district. That is why McCready took back his concession and why an official investigation is now underway. The whole thing comes down to Bladen County. The Republican candidate Harris had hired a consulting firm called the Red Dome Group to help with his campaign. The Red Dome Group hired a man named McCrae Dowless, a local political operative who also happens to have a felony criminal record. Dowless then hired volunteers to go door to door to talk to voters. And here's what happened next.
I was telling her who I was voting for. And then she didn't want to hear it. So I just didn't say nothing else. I just filled out 2 blocks and I gave it to her. I signed and I gave it to her. It was not sealed. She supposed to have sealed it. She said she was going to seal it, but she never sealed it in front of me. And it never got turned in.
The Atlantic this way, quote, according to accounts given to reporters and in sworn affidavits, Dowless had a team of workers going around collecting absentee ballots from voters, which is a violation of state law. In some cases, the affidavits allege these workers completed ballots for voters, also a clear violation of the law. The state election board has now confirmed that it has issued subpoenas for documents from all of the major players, including the Harris campaign. A hearing is scheduled for December 21st to review all of the evidence. But here's the thing. Republicans, they should have seen this thing coming from a mile away. According to court documents obtained by The New Yorker, allegations of electoral fraud against Dowless, they date back to at least 2014. How about some vetting here? And the radio program This American Life reported in December of 2016 that Dowless told the State Board of Elections that he paid members of his team for each ballot that they collected, which is illegal. Now, please take a look at this. We know the first big race that Dowless worked on was in 2010, an important year if you listen to what Republican State Senator Dan Bishop said just yesterday.
There have been complaints, we now know, about absentee ballot by mail activity in Bladen in 2010, 2014, 2016, and then, of course, the terribly disheartening news reports this year. It is equally clear that over that period of time, authorities have failed to get to the bottom of the problem.
So let's add it up. McCrae Dowless has a record as a convicted felon. He's faced allegations of electoral fraud going back to 2014, and he allegedly admitted to questionable activities before the state elections board in 2016. So here's my question. Why on earth was he chosen, was he allowed to work on a major political campaign in 2018? And why exactly is Dallas Woodhouse, the executive director of the North Carolina Republican Party since 2015, now telling our colleagues over at CNN that this whole thing comes as a complete surprise?
We are as horrified by it as anybody. And if the allegations presented by the Board of Elections rise to a level of turning the outcome of this race or having substantial likelihood, there has to be a new election.
Horrified by what? Doing it, finding out about it, or getting caught? I want to go to NBC's Katie Beck, who has been following this story. She is in Bladen County, North Carolina. All right, Katie, where do we go from here?
Well, Stephanie, as the days go on and more evidence is presented, the talk of a new election is becoming more and more real. People on the ground here want to know who knew what and when did they know it. As you said, this is not the first time that Dallas has had questionable activity with absentee ballots. This is not the first time that he's had questionable activity in this county. So folks here have a lot of questions, and I think the State Board of Elections, who have now voted twice not to certify this election, are taking every precaution. They're trying to be as transparent as possible in the investigation they're conducting. It is a deep dive investigation. It involves about 4,000 ballots, and they are putting a lot of what they are finding online for the public to view, saying, look, here's the evidence we're gathering. You take it in as we're gathering it and make your own decisions. And as you stated, they plan to have a public hearing within 2 weeks to sort of air all of this publicly and see where people stand. Do they think a new election is warranted? Do they think there's still integrity in anything that happened here in November, given all of the accusations that have come forward? Were these votes tampered with and turned in? Were they simply thrown out? They're trying to figure out how much Dowless had to do with those votes, him and his associates, how many of them they actually physically turned in. So that is what they're trying to get to the bottom of now.
My goodness. Katie, this one is a stunner. In my panel, it is an excellent one. Pennsylvania Republican Congressman Ryan Costello and former New York Democratic Congressman Steve Israel, who chaired the DCCC. Congressman Costello, Mark Harris hires Red Dome hires McCrae Dowless. Can Harris claim he's innocent? Where does the buck stop?
Interestingly, Mark Harris beat my colleague Rob Pittenger in the primary, and so this is an anti-establishment candidate coming in. So I think I take the North Carolina GOP state chairman at his word that they had nothing to do with this. I also want to say excellent reporting there. We should give kudos to the North Carolina State Election Board for handling this, I think, in a very transparent way, slowing this down. I think it's highly probable that there was impropriety here, and the real issue, I think, is 905 votes. Well, what if they can accumulate 888 improper ballots? Is there going to be confidence that somehow, oh, it was only 888 out of 905? At this point, it's just extremely compromised. I don't know how you can seat at this point in time.
Okay, so kudos to the election board, without a doubt. But Congressman Israel, when you hear the state GOP chairman say he's so shocked he threw up about it when he heard, is that credible?
No.
I mean, we just went through the history here.
It made me want to throw up, actually. You know, it's like that movie character, you know, I'm shocked that something like this would happen. Look, we in the United States, we actually send election observers to fledgling democracies to ensure the credibility of elections. It appears that now we have to do that in the United States. And what's ironic here is President Trump was ranting and raving about voter fraud. Now, where it clearly appears, it helps Republicans. Look at Bladen County. Let's just break down this Bladen County. 19% of absentee ballots were submitted by Republicans. 61% of those absentee ballots went to the Republican. That's impossible. I chaired the DCCC. That doesn't smell, it stinks. So I agree with Ryan. This election needs to be redone. This supposed winner of this election cannot be seated.
I agree the data stinks. I just want to make one distinction here. This was the candidate engaging with this vendor. And so I want to make sure we separate the National Republican Congressional Committee, the North Carolina State Republican Committee. They don't control who you as a candidate hire. So when we get into the investigation, this is a criminal investigation. Who hired him in the campaign? Who knew what? What were they engaged to do? There's going to be other folks working for this gentleman who had a felony conviction. They're going to get to the bottom of it. The data points, though, to your point about it stinks. There's no way that you have absentee ballot requests at the percentages they were, and then the actual ballots cast on the absentee the way that it was. It just doesn't add up.
All right, well, then the good news is we collectively agree that it stinks, and they're investigating it. Both of you stay right here, because you know I